If you didn't notice the very apropos music I played as you were walking in, I thought it was fitting. Tried so hard and got so far, but in the end it sometimes feels like it doesn't matter. So in my 16 years of teaching, I still feel like on my observations, behavior management is always going to kind of be my room for improvement. And I think that's just because every year is always so different than the last that what you thought you knew, you realize you didn't know anything. There was one time, for those of you who worked under Miss Shepherd, I was being observed by her in the computer lab doing a technology lesson where we were integrating Google Drawing with the science lesson we were doing. And I had a student who kept talking to her neighbor, and eventually after like 3 warnings I was like, okay, I need you to switch computers. She proceeded to growl at me with Miss Shepherd in the room. And when I, had a little bit of a discussion with her right there, and she crawled under the table and growled at me again. And at that moment in time, I just looked at her and said, we're going to deal with this later, and I kept on teaching, because I didn't want my observation to be me dealing with this one student. But in no way am I going to claim to be an all-encompassing expert on this stuff. I'm just going to throw at you some of my research and some research-based strategies, and hopefully it's like macaroni and it eventually sticks. My 5 classroom rules. So let's make sure we're following them, Miss Brown and Miss Betts. I haven't gone over them yet, but they are posted on the wall if you forget. Here they are here in the classroom. We are going to follow directions quickly, which you guys did. Thank you for quieting down. We are going to raise our hands for permission to speak. We are going to raise our hands for permission to leave our seats. We are going to make smart choices, and we are going to make our team strong. So if you're not quite sure what that one means, everybody in here is your team, and you need to make sure you're doing things that are helping them, not hindering them. So those are the 5 rules for us here in my classroom. Started, yes, Miss Cat.
Is that your tweak of the whole brain learning to make our dear team stronger?
Well, these actually come directly from the Whole Brain website.
Oh,
I just have make our team stronger because I don't like that word dear. I don't know.
I like, because it used to just be make your dear teacher happy.
So they, in their newest update, they changed it to make our team stronger.
Oh, I like that.
I did get rid of the dear because that's just not me. But the whole make our team stronger is still valid and still very appropriate. So I guess I can get into this now since Ms. Cat brought it up. These do come from the whole brain teaching theory. You'll notice in the back of your packet there's a list of resources. Those are my resources I use to create this. So if you wonder more about anything that I say to you, the very last page is my works cited. You're welcome. How many of you go into the school year with this plan? Yeah? No? It's going to be great. We're going to go from the start and we're going to get to the end. And then how many of your years end up... Oh, come on. So close. Come on. How many of your years end up like that? If you're not nodding your head, then you're not doing it right. We always go in with this grand plan of things are going to go perfect. And, I know what I've done. I've done this so many years. And it's going to be great. And then, like I said, every year is different. Every kid is different. Every day for every kid is different. So what worked yesterday might not work today. Certainly what worked last year might not work this year.
What if my storm looks more like a tsunami?
I realize you walked in late, but rule number 2 there, everybody, what was it? Or no?
Raise your hand for permission to speak.
Okay, let's try it one more time. Everybody, rule number 2, what was it?
Silently raise your hand for
Okay,
permission
you guys,
to speak.
come on in. Everybody, rule number 2, what was it?
Silently
raise your hand for permission to speak. Okay, thank you. So, your plan, reality, we never know what obstacles are going to come in our way. So, we're gonna plan to adapt is our plan. Used to this tiered pyramid, right? Academics, tier 1 is what's in the classroom, tier 2 is your interventions, tier 3 is when you get to the special education department, your targeted interventions. Why is behavior any different? Tier 1 is going to be your strategies that work for every student. Tier 2 is going to be your students who need those specialized interventions. And then tier 3 will be your intensive support. Exact same as it is for academics, behavior should follow the same model. I am going to try and get us out of here in an hour, so if I go quickly, that's kind of why I gave you the slides, so you don't have to try and write everything down. But just think about that, though. We have these rules, or we have these tiers for academics, and and we expect that to work for academics, and that's what we follow. But really, behaviorally, it becomes the same model. 80% of your students will get hit by tier 1. Little redirections, little like rule reminders, little whatever. And I love that you shouted out, because I meant to prepare somebody ahead of time and say, hey, will you shout out at this point in time so we can do this? One of the strategies, besides having good rules, yes, ma'am.
You also planned for me to come in late to cause distraction in the class. You're
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, no, I mean,
You're awesome. You're winning.
you are amazing, and you have done everything that I needed. Thank you. One of the strategies, besides just having rules and having them posted in the room, is that subtle reminder. And let's say Oki gets up to sharpen her pencil. Rather than calling out Miss Oki, I'll just say, class, what's rule number 3? And then the class repeats it.
Raise your hand.
So rule number 3 was what? Raise your hand for permission to leave your seat. Okay, and that quick reminder reminds the whole class, and it also reminds Miss Oki without calling her out. So we don't need to be like, Aubrey, why are you out of your seat right now? Come on, you know the rules. You just, and if somebody's doing, let's say somebody's, okay, so I see Bean over here working, which is fine. There were a couple of people that said they would need to, and it's okay. But I see her not doing what I need her to be doing. I might just say, class, what's rule number 5? Make our team stronger. Right? And really, the rule that beats all rules comes up with this quote that I have on the board here, that rule number 4. Rule number 4 and rule number 5 encompass everything. Doesn't matter what's going on. If they're working when they should be listening, they're not making smart choices. They're not making the team stronger. So if it doesn't follow into one of those first 3 rules, then you can just, hey, I see, I see a person drawing here. I just be like, rule 4, and then they repeat it. And this is something that you would ingrain in at the start of the year. Obviously, if I were to come in this point in the year and say 4, class would be looking at me like, well, we only have 2 of us here. What's going on? So this comes into that start of the year, teaching your rules, teaching your procedures, and then sticking to them, which for me is the hardest part. Because you get these rules, you get these routines, and then you get teaching curriculum, and suddenly, I forget to go, hey, rule 2, when Sally's talking. So that there are 4 steps to establishing a habit. So if you think about the start of the year and your process at the start of the year to help handle these behaviors, first one I'm going to explain. Looks like, sounds like. What does it look like to follow directions? What does it sound like to raise my hand? But explaining it's only going to get about 25% of your kids. So we're going to demonstrate it. So I might say, hey, Miss Kara, can you show me the right way to raise your hand for permission to leave your seat? Perfect. Hey, Miss Kat, can you show me the wrong way?
Hey, can I leave my seat, please?
Okay.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Perfect. That was so good. That was so good at being bad. Okay? So if you demonstrate it and you kind of get that little role play going on, you'll get to about 35% of your kids practicing the right way over and over and over. Hey class, can you show me what it looks like to raise our hands to talk? Come on. Come on. Okay. All right. You're good. Thank you. That last one's the key. Refining what's going to get 80 to 90% of your kids. Now, you notice that's not 100%. Because you're going to have some kids that just never raise their hand. Okay? But that refining, so if Miss Cat, go ahead and do it again.
Mr. Brad, can I go to the bathroom?
Okay, rule number 3, everybody. Raise your hand for permission to leave your seat.
I did.
You'll notice up here, rule number 2 there. Do you see how I have written on here?
Yeah, that's why
I actually wrote that on because I had kids that did that. And I guess I never wrote it on to rule number 3. I did raise my hand. Okay. Silently raise your hand for permission to speak. Yes, refining. Yes. Ms.
That's
Brown.
why I noticed it and I kept telling her, silently raise your hand.
Yeah. So, and again, it always comes back to, what's rule number 4? Make smart choices, okay? And is shouting out a smart choice? Is shouting out making our dear team stronger? Not so much. Okay, but it's this refining. Refining should be never ending. And I don't know about you, but at this point in time in the year, you get into these grooves where you're like, we're teaching curriculum and I'm just going to ignore the behavior. But then it gets to the point that you can't teach curriculum because you're dealing with behavior. Refining is never ending. First term, second term, third term, you get back from Thanksgiving break, you get back from Christmas break. Never ending. What do you think the principal's saying to his teacher there? Any guesses?
Do better.
Do better. Okay, but rule number 2. Rule number 2, everybody. Raise your hand. Silently raise your hand for permission to speak. Miss Kara, what do you think he's saying?
That he appreciates her is what I'm going to
You're going to go with he appreciates her? Okay, so I'm going to go as far as to say this teacher is coming to him to talk about a behavior student. How do you think he's responding? Senor A?
He's gonna ask, and what is your tier 2 intervention look like?
Okay, that would be the good response. Miss Dean? Have you tried building a relationship with the student? And I know I am a teacher. I hate hearing that. Because that's what we do. But the reason that is such a repeated response is those positive relationships are going to solve a lot of your problems. And even with your harder kids, like I've got one in particular in mind, every day is a struggle. Every day is a struggle. And I have had to, show genuine interest in the student. Not in their work or what they're doing, but what do you like? What do you do? What's going on? He's football. Everything is football. Okay? And so we found a way, this makes me sad to even talk about. We found a way, when he comes in, he gets to go out for a quick football break. To get him that, movement, but it also gives him something he's interested in. We'll get into the target game later, but with the target, if he gets his target, he gets a football card. And it's done so much. These little things have done so much in helping him, just developing that relationship, showing interest. When you see them doing well, call it out. Like, man, I'm so glad you stayed sitting in your seat for that whole part of that lesson. Thank you. Let them know you noticed. Let them know you care. And then that last one there, spend time with them, is probably the hardest because our time is so valuable. Like with this student, it's not me that pulls in for his break. It's our behavior team. But then because I've got to teach the other 27 kids. But, you've got lunches, and I know I hate lunch. I hate giving up lunch. But that spending time with kids helps a lot. And I know, we're out on recess duty. What's the problem out on recess duty? Just bringing out a football. You're watching, but you're throwing a football. That little bit, you've got to be out there anyway. Use it to build those relationships. Because as much as I hate hearing, have you developed a relationship with the student? Because yes, I've tried. The reason they say it is because it matters. And we're going to have another one of these down the road dealing with student engagement that has the exact same data to back it up. You want your behaviors decreased, you engage your students. You want your behaviors decreased, you want your students engaged, make sure you have a positive relationship with them. Because the more they care about you, the more you care about them, the more they're going to care about you, and the more they're going to want to do good for you. And I know that's hard with the hard kids because you're like, dude, just shut up. But if you say that to him, it's not really positive, and it's not going to make him care. Let's see. I already kind of talked about the positive reinforcement. So I'm way ahead of the game here. I like how Bonnie's not stepping on my last nerve. Okay? Positive. Find the positive. I like that you didn't blow my eardrums when you walked into the classroom today. It's hard sometimes to find those little positive things, but those positive comments and that positive relationship is going to help you a ton with your behavior, with your students with behavior challenges. So we have a challenging student. Now what? We have a kid who constantly is out of his seat, shouts out, whatever. First, you're going to identify what the challenging behavior is, and sometimes it's more than one. But then your next step is to try and figure out the underlying cause of it. Why is this student acting out? With the particular student I was talking about earlier, honestly, a lot of the time it's because he's bored because he's brilliant. And I know that we focus so much on the lower kids that you just think the high kids will be fine. But it's oftentimes those kids that are acting out because I know this. I don't need to listen. So finding that underlying cause, whether it's because they're bored. Now obviously there's some he needs to be medicated. You can't do anything about that. You can't even say that. There's some things that we've got to figure out a way to work with, but to find the underlying cause of it, if it is something like ADHD and he's unmedicated and you can't do anything, then make sure he gets movement breaks. Whatever it is, find that underlying cause, and that's going to help you find your solution. If we have a disruption, so intervening, you have a student who is being disruptive, you want to keep your focus on the student. Okay? If you have tried the, rule number 3, rule number 4, whatever, and that student is still acting out, it doesn't do any good to punish your whole class because of one student. So you want to keep your focus on that one student. You want to be clear about, this is what you're doing, this is what I need you to be doing. Be clear about the behavior, hit it early. Now sometimes it's hard to know if it's, new in the year, whatever. But if you know a student is a certain way and they start getting that way, then get it right away. Don't okay, I can handle this, and this is again a problem I have. I can ignore it, I can ignore it, I can ignore it. I can't ignore it anymore! You ever do that? You're just it's okay. He's just being him, and I can ignore it, and then you just suddenly yeah. Okay? So you want to make sure you nip it in the bud before it gets to that point. Because distress is often the cause of the disruption. An absolute last case scenario, if you can't get a student to cooperate, you need to remove them from the situation. Whether that's be, go sit out in the hall for a few minutes, we need a break, or whether that is you call admin to come in and help you, or behavior team, or whatever. Like, hey, I've got so-and-so student, I need to teach. We have quite a bit of support in the school. We just need to remember to use it. I think I'm moving faster than an hour. Does that make you guys sad?
Yes, would
Okay.
you slow down, please?
Okay. We are a Love and Logic school. How many of you have been around long enough to have had a training on Love and Logic? A decent amount. Decent amount. Okay. Yeah. Love and Logic is exactly as it sounds. Like when you're going to administer consequences, you do it with love. Okay? And the hard part about that is oftentimes when we're administering the consequences, it's because we've been taken to level 10. But you need to make sure even when you're on level 10, it doesn't show because your anger will feed theirs.
Yep.
And then the logic is their consequences. Whatever you deal with the behavior with love, their consequences are logical. I follow a principal on social medias, Principal Lamb. He's like my favorite. I actually saw one with him earlier today. Like, you give the students a choice. You say we can either solve this behavior or we can call home. Which do you want? And you say it exactly like that. Like, I don't care which one you choose. You can either stop or we're calling home. Okay? And just giving them that logical consequence of, I'm not mad. I'm not upset. But what you are doing is disrupting the whole class and that needs to stop. So which one is it going to be? And the majority of time, they're going to choose, I'll stop. Because they don't want to call home. Also in the back of your packet, and we're not going to go over every single one of them, but one of the things that Love and Logic recommends is you pick as a school 5 to 7 core beliefs. And that is the second to last page in there. But just like, I believe that every attempt should be made to maintain dignity of both the adult and the student. And the student. Key words there. So it's just core philosophies of Love and Logic that kind of guide it. I'm not going to go over all 20 of them, but they are there if you want to look at them and just kind of get the idea of what it is and what it means to be Love and Logic. But here's a basic set of classroom expectations in a Love and Logic classroom. So these are the things when you look at the student, if you're having issues or whatever, these are kind of the things you can come back to. You can do anything you want in my classroom, as long as it doesn't disrupt anyone else. Okay? So, just some simple that, like, I teach when there are no distractions. I mean, you've seen, I even made one once where I'll wait. And then the next thing you know, it cuts to a skeleton of the teacher waiting. Okay? But that teaching with no distractions shows them that, and you might need to move on quicker, obviously, than you're now a skeleton. But if they're distracting, it's that whole nip it in the bud. Don't teach while they're distracting. Don't think, oh, well, that's not too bad. We can handle it. Stop it right away. I listen to students who raise their hands. So these are, along the lines of our classroom rules, some of them. I only listen to one person at a time. When you have multiple kids coming up and like, blah, 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 blah. You, go. Okay? They need to learn, and that helps them teach just the basic, respects of life. If somebody's talking, then you wait your turn. You don't just interrupt. Tell the kids that I need you to treat me with the same respect that I treat you. which does mean you have to treat them with respect. And I know that sounds funny to say, but I've seen some things. So you need to make sure that you're maintaining your composure, that you are always treating that student with dignity and respect, even if they've taken you to a level 10. If someone causes a problem, I will do something. They need to make sure that that's clear. And even if that is student growling at you under the table, we're going to deal with this later. And then you go back to teaching your class. Because under the table, she's not a distraction. She's not hurting anybody else. But the other 27 kids deserve to keep learning. But then you do need to make sure, we're going to deal with this later, that you do deal with it later. And then one of the big parts of logic is that very last one. What I do depends on the situation. Depends on the student, and it depends on how that student is willing to help solve that problem. And that is where the logic of love and logic comes in, is okay, we have this problem. And it's like the whole, do you want to stop this disruption or do you want to call home? I'll stop. Because most of them don't want to call home. Do you want to stop this discussion? Do you want to stop this disruption or do you want to finish your learning during recess? And I know, again, I hate to give away our recesses, but we're going to talk a little bit more about something with that in a minute. But principles to operate by. Model the behavior you desire. And I know I've said it multiple times, but if you come at the student with anger, they're going to respond with anger. Allow affordable mistakes. Now, think about what that means. We're nipping the problem in the bud. Students shouting out, hey, rule number 2. Whole class says it. You move on. You don't come back to that student like, okay, they shouted out, it's a thing, we reminded them, we go on. We allowed an affordable mistake. Some things don't necessarily require you to come back. If you can get that gentle reminder and it helps them remember, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry I got excited. Whatever. Third one there. Always, always, always come at your students with empathy. Because back to the whole underlying cause is often distress. You might not know what that distress is. Our kids are dealing with things at home that we don't know, that we've never dealt with, that we don't understand. And they deserve, it's just like all of us have a different story, so do they. And I should come at you with kindness because I don't know what you're going through today. I don't know if your dog was throwing up when you left home and you don't know if he's okay. And maybe he just ate too much and he puked. And they don't know that because they had to go to school. Like for kids, what we would look at as, dude, your dog threw up, it's fine. It could be a big deal to them. So we've always got to come at them with kindness, with respect, knowing that we don't know their story entirely. And some things we will know. But the day-to-day changes. We never want to be angry. And the sarcasm, I speak fluent sarcasm. But you don't want to do that when you're handling a behavior situation. Ms. Kat?
Yeah, I found that if I am too angry that, even kindergartners understand if I tell them, I can't talk about this right now because I'm too mad, so I need to calm down and we'll discuss it later, and they'll be like...
Yeah, and honestly, that's even worse than yelling at them. To them, they'd be like, I cannot do this right now, we will talk later. That whole and that's another whole brain teaching thing, I think. I don't know. I've read so
No,
many
I
things.
believe it's love and logic.
Maybe it's love and logic, but the whole, well, with the student under the table, there are going to be consequences for this. We will talk about it later. Is that love and, like I said, I've read so many things. But that anticipation, that sitting there, that, oh crap. You know, and it could be, you just wanted to talk to them later when you were calmed down, and that talking to is going to be all they get. But they don't know that, and that 15, 20, 30 minutes is going to eat them alive. Like, oh crap, what's going to happen? And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's enough. Goes with that fourth bullet point there. Let the students have the opportunity to solve their own problem. And I think that, I'm just going to say it, that's one of the biggest problems with our kids these days. Is they've not had to solve their own problems. That they're used to, and I don't want to say there's anything wrong with it, but they're used to the parenting of, oh, well, let's help you fix that. How about we let them fix it? Okay, we have this problem. What do you think your consequence should be? And oftentimes, when you say, what do you think your consequence should be? They're going to give a worse consequence than you would have given them. And then you can look like the hero and go, I appreciate that. And because of your honesty, let's go with this. Logical consequences without love and logic. Okay, if a student threw trash on the floor and refused to pick it up, it doesn't make sense. I don't even know. I can't even think of it. Because the logical consequence is what you want to go to. Okay, well, you didn't pick that up. You can spend the first 5 minutes of recess cleaning my classroom. Just a logical, like I can't even think of what an illogical consequence would have been for that. But just make your consequence make sense. If they're shouting out in class, it doesn't make sense to give them an hour detention on Friday. I didn't change the top of what that says. This is 3 specific strategies to help with some of those students. And these do come from the whole brain teaching and just different ideas. So you've got the first one there is flight school, and this is where I was talking with the recess. Whole brain teaching is all about not taking away their recess because they need it. However, 30 seconds at the start of their recess will feel like their whole recess today. So the flight school is, okay, you had a struggle with this, we're gonna practice it. And flight school is all about that practicing, learning how to take off so we can soar. Okay? So if they were shouting out in class, then the first time you're gonna spend, okay, have a seat, 10 seconds of not shouting out. 10 seconds doesn't hurt you. It doesn't steal your... But to them, it's like, 10 seconds feels like an hour sitting there in silence with no one else around. With the flight school, each time increases it to the point that even with the practice cards down there, you never take any more than maybe 3 minutes of their recess tops. Because they need it. And you need it. You need them to have it. The target game in the middle there is what I was talking about earlier. With your, as whole brain teaching calls them, beloved rascal. With your beloved rascal, you set a target. And there's 2 different ways. There's 2 different ways you can do it. The probably normal approach would be, here's your target. If you get it, then you get a reward. And that works, unless it doesn't. In which case you can play the target game in a way that says, you set a target. And then after school you have or not after school, whatever, after class period, after school, whatever, you said you have a quick meeting with that kid. 1 to 5, write down on this sticky note how well you think you did. And they're going to write something, and you're going to write something. And if your numbers match, then they're still rewarded, because at least they recognize that there was a problem. So it's kind of a stepping stone into, okay, how do you feel you did today? Okay, well, we both said you were a 2. Okay, so, I'm glad that you understand that, and you give them just whatever, little dinky candy or something. Now let's talk about how we can make it a 3 tomorrow. So taking small steps rather than expecting your big disruption. Yeah.
Magically go away.
Yeah, to magically go away. There you go. So just small baby steps, final thoughts on our beloved rascals. I was about to say something that's like my big kicker at the end. And I don't want to spoil it. I wrote all of these notes and I'm not even using them, which is mostly a good thing. The most irresistible motivator for students is going to be improvement. And that's what I was just getting at. Well, we both said you were a 1 today. Let's try to be a 2 tomorrow. And then you can reward that, dude, we're a 2. Can we try for a 3? Yeah, and then eventually, hey, 3s, hey, 3s, hey, 3s. How about tomorrow we try for a 4? I think you can do it. That improvement is going to be a motivator. If you suddenly expect your most beloved of rascals to become your model student, you're going to fail every time. You've got to work with those logical steps and those slow building blocks. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, just kind of reviewing. Kids, including your behavior problems, will learn best when they're having fun. Now, I know we don't all seek out to purposefully plan boring lessons. But the more that we can make the lessons fun, the more engaged they're going to be, the less behavior problems you're going to have. And I realize that PD conferences are like the worst at number 3, but I also wanted to respect your time. The longer you talk as a teacher, the more students you're going to learn or lose. Yeah, the more you talk, the more they get lost. So the more you can have them, okay guys, 3 plus 3, 6. 3 plus 4, 7. And all of the kids participating. In fact, when I was at Clark and Johnson last Tuesday, we observed a math class. And I actually said to the principal, do junior high kids respond? How do they do with choral response? Because it was a whole lot of the whole class sitting, nobody doing their work. She'd ask a question, the same like 3 students would answer. She had no behavior problems. Part of that could have been because there were, 4 adults in the room. But they weren't engaged. So the more they're having fun, the more they're participating, the more they're learning, the less they're disrupting. Scolding increases management problems. Goes back to that anger, begets anger. If you are angry with the student is going to get defensive back. In place of telling students how to behave, we should guide them through the process, so guiding them back to like the flight school. Okay, well, we were having problems with shouting out. Let's practice sitting quiet. And we've probably all done it before, like half your class is talking. You're like, okay, guys, we're going to stop. I need 15 seconds of showing me quiet students. And you make the whole class practice. So some of these things work for behavior, even if it's not just one beloved rascal. Building bonds, student, like I said, I realize we all hate have you built a relationship with them? But the reason it's kind of become what it is because it matters. And I know that we all know that, but it also never hurts to be reminded. And then the most important value we can teach our kids is kindness. And it goes back to the modeling what we expect. Showing the kids that even though I'm upset with you, it can be handled in a kind way. What do you think the $1 million point is? And it's going to go back to something we've already talked about, but the $1 million question, what do you think? We don't fix kids. We fix relationships with kids. If you have a beloved rascal who's a constant disruption in your class, figure out why. Figure out what they need. Because clearly there's something, not necessarily in your classroom, but in their life that they need. And it's up to us to figure that out for the other 27 kids in our classroom. I know it sucks being told, well, build relationships. But do it. Because it helps. If you can get out your phones and scan that and just take my little 5-second survey, there's like 6 questions on it, I don't know.